the news, anybody who was a landscaper or does yard work, they're familiar with the desert, and they go into people's homes all the time. And I told my guy today, I said,
While federal agents spend weeks processing Guthrie's land and interviewing everyone on the block, this residence remained completely vacant while the nation stood by. It appeared to be a total ghost house. There was nothing remarkable about it, just a simple vacancy in a typical suburb. Most folks wouldn't blink an eye at it, especially in an area with high tenant turnover and constant renovations shifting the local landscape. This video's headline poses a vital inquiry. That neighboring structure wasn't actually deserted, so what exactly was tucked away inside? We still lack an official public response. Neither the feds nor the Pima County Sheriff have spilled the beans, and those who saw the evidence firsthand are staying quiet. However, we can look at the facts. We can also lean on what veteran forensic specialists who handle these specific types of crimes have to say. Evidence is inevitably left behind at any hideout, period. It doesn't matter if they tried to hide it, bleached the place, or if they fled in a panic or took their time. There are certain traces you just can't erase once you've occupied a room for any length of time. Our own biological makeup guarantees that reality. Today, we're going to virtually inspect that floor plan, focusing entirely on the forensic trail. Our goal is to solve that mystery using professional profiling and proven scientific methods. If that location served as a base for plotting Nancy Guthrie's fate, a physical footprint remains. The FBI's specialized forensics units are trained specifically to uncover such crumbs. Just a quick heads up first. This entire presentation draws from public records, credited reporters, former police brass, and formal government press releases. Currently, no person of interest has been officially indicted or identified in connection to Guthrie's missing person case. Any lab talk here represents standard investigative procedure rather than verified evidence. We're digging for answers just like the Bureau is. Phase 1. The FBI's specific line of questioning. We should begin by reviewing the facts that have hit the news wires. On March 17, 2026, 45 days since Nancy vanished, journalist Brian Enton shared some news on his channel. He noted the FBI was back in the Catalina foothills area. This wasn't a casual visit, but a targeted sweep involving much more pointed inquiries. To be more precise, Enton claimed detectives were quizzing locals about a nearby home where the resident had packed up and left prior to the abduction. He chose his words very carefully, which is commendable since those specific nuances carry a lot of weight. He didn't say the house was definitely a crime scene. He just confirmed the feds were digging into the identity and departure timeline of the previous tenant. While those are separate points, they both matter. Also, many missed a key detail in his report. This wasn't just about a single house. He elaborated that agents were also busy collecting names of every single laborer or contractor who had been on any job site in the vicinity. Leading up to Nancy's disappearance, the Bureau wasn't looking for vague descriptions of workers. They wanted a full roster of actual names. Authorities were trying to sync specific people with specific renovation jobs and exact dates. That kind of meticulous detail matching names to specific calendars isn't part of a basic door-to-door. It points to a very intentional strategy. You do that when you suspect someone used their legitimate presence in the area before February 1st as a way to hide in plain sight. It's the perfect disguise to watch, plot, and linger without raising any alarms. Consider the weight of that. The feds aren't just casting a wide net. They are seeking specific identities. This shift indicates the case has transitioned from general data gathering to a much more focused hunt. They're pinning down certain people to precise timeframes right near Nancy's front door. That's how you narrow the field of suspects. When the circle tightens like that, it means things are becoming clearer behind the scenes. Section 2. The locals who saw the signs early on. Long before the Bureau focused on that property, a couple of people nearby were already raising red flags. This matters because it shows when the community first noticed something was off. If locals flag a concern and the FBI later asks about those exact same things, it proves the tip didn't just sit in a folder. It was vetted and eventually sparked real momentum. Take Aldine Meister, for instance. She's been a fixture in the Catalina foothills for almost 30 years. During several chats with Brian Enton, she was very vocal. She explained that her next-door neighbors had vanished, and she'd specifically urged police to search that unit. She point-blank told Anton that those folks had left, and she kept insisting that the house be cleared. If you spot weird stuff like abandoned laundry, you have to report it. Apparently, the guy seemed oblivious but was quite fluent in English. It wasn't just some random hunch or a casual remark. It was a formal request she had already filed with the cops. Living somewhere for 30 years gives you an intuition you can't just fake. You recognize the local patterns, the regular vehicles, and which rental properties have a revolving door. You can distinguish between a standard move-out and a situation that feels fundamentally wrong. Aldine Meister was so in sync with her surroundings that she knew deep down that house required a thorough sweep. Most importantly, she's the one who spotted a suspicious individual hanging around roughly 2 or 3 weeks before Nancy went missing. It wasn't a local or a familiar worker. It was just a guy whose vibe was totally off. While his facial features were blurry, she did catch a glimpse of his headwear. After keeping an eye on him, she was certain of one thing. He was an outsider who stood out like a sore thumb. She mentioned to Anton that 30 years in one spot teaches you what fits in. Consider those two facts. A weird outsider spotted just 2 or 3 weeks before the snatching. There is a leased home that goes vacant right in that same window of time, and a resident nearby spots the connection. Laura Gargano, another local, explained the scenario to Brian Enton by noting how rare rentals are there. She pointed out one specific unit where the occupants vanished just a few days after the incident occurred. Her focus was on the missing person, Nancy Young. After seeing an empty driveway, she checked in with a few folks on the block to verify the vehicle was truly gone. Everyone reached the same conclusion that the residents had bolted simply because their cars were nowhere to be seen. While her surveillance setup only covered her own patch of pavement, it caught enough of the perimeter to signal that the vibe of the street had changed. That prompted her to reach out to the authorities, following the old rule about speaking up when things look off. Even if it seems trivial or irrelevant, you still pick up the phone. She did exactly that. If you combine these reports, you get one witness who saw an outsider acting out of place weeks prior, and another who watched a house clear out right after. This all centers on the mystery of Nancy. 2 different residents were essentially monitoring the same weird behavior from their own front porches. They lacked concrete proof but had solid instincts, which were validated when federal agents showed up 6 weeks later asking the same things the neighbors had been whispering about. This isn't just some random fluke. It is the official probe finally hitting the same trail the neighborhood had already sniffed out. Section 3 covers the concept of a tactical base. Let us dive into how a seasoned professional analyzes these kinds of real estate setups. Bob Krieger is a heavy hitter in this field, having logged almost 30 years in Pima County law enforcement. He was not just walking a beat, he led the tactical response team. His whole career revolved around decoding how criminals plot their moves, set up shop, watch their marks, and exploit the local terrain to stay hidden. He is intimately familiar with the Catalina foothills, the local landscape, and how those streets are designed. He gave an exclusive interview to Parade specifically about this residence and its role in the case. To quote him directly, an empty house could easily serve as a primary hub or a launchpad for anyone looking to commit a crime. It gives them a perfect excuse to hang around the area at all hours without looking suspicious. Think about that for a second. A built-in reason to keep coming back. This is not about a quick drive-by. It is about staying a while and visiting often. It is a way to avoid drawing attention from the folks next door or people driving by who might see a light on or a truck parked outside. If you live there, you belong there. That totally normal, boring explanation is exactly what makes a tactical base so useful. Krieger did not stop at the excuse, though. He broke down the actual tactical benefits in detail. Occupying that space allowed someone to stay low profile while monitoring everyone's habits. They could track when people left, when they returned, and specifically learn Nancy's daily schedule. Take a moment to process that, learning her routine. Over 30 years of tactical work and detective duty in Pima County, Bob Krieger has identified the hallmarks of a premeditated attack. He knows what kind of trail is left behind when a person spends weeks prepping for a move. His analysis of this particular empty unit in the foothills is not just some abstract idea. He is outlining the cold logic of planning, where someone uses time and closeness to study a target before pouncing. That focus on the clock is what really stands out here. What time did Nancy head out each day? When did her house go dark? Was the door always locked? And when was she most vulnerable? When did relatives stop by? You cannot figure that stuff out with one glance. It requires being there day after day. It demands a nearby headquarters with a clear line of sight, which is the exact scenario Krieger is pointing to. All of this centers on an 84-year-old woman living solo with a very set schedule, located just a few blocks from a site the feds are now scrutinizing. Chapter 4 breaks down the makeup of a hideout. This is where we get to the core of it. If that place was used to watch or plan anything before February 1st, it definitely left a footprint. We are not guessing here. This is pure lab work, which is why federal evidence teams are so specialized. The primary focus is biomatter, because people are constantly dropping trace amounts of themselves without even knowing it. We lose about 30 to 40,000 skin cells every single hour, and those particles land on everything we touch. Stray hairs, especially those with root material, end up stuck in the furniture or woven into the rugs wherever a person spends their time. Spit can end up on cup edges or knobs, or really anywhere after someone touches their face and then a surface. Sweat also leaves a mark on chairs, walls, or spots where someone leaned for a while. Inside a leased space where someone stayed even just for a couple of weeks, there is going to be a huge amount of this genetic debris piled up. It builds up inside the rug pile, settles into the wood, and clings to the trim, the ledges, and the edges of the furniture. In this specific context, all that biological junk is what the lab techs refer to as touch DNA. Think of it just like the term implies. It's not about some big biological incident, but just the trace evidence left when someone is there and touches something. You do not need a struggle or an injury to find it. You just need someone to have been there for a significant period. If a person spent hours watching from a window, they'd likely leave genetic markers on the frame, the ledge, or even the glass pane itself. A person sitting in the same spot day after day is going to leave a ton of microscopic evidence on the upholstery and the armrests. Anyone using the sink, grabbing the fridge handle, or putting a glass down is tagging those spots with their DNA. For the detectives, the fact that this was a leased unit is the big break. We can easily track the small group of people who actually belonged in that unit. Between the manager's records and lease agreements, every resident is accounted for. Leases show exactly who was there and when. Former residents can be talked to, and their genetic profiles can be ruled out once they provide a quick swab. Once those regulars are cleared, investigators focus on the mystery samples left by outsiders without a valid excuse for being there. Those unexplained biological traces become the primary target. Since the sheriff admitted the main crime scene's evidence is a complicated, messy mix, finding matching biological hits at a separate site becomes an incredibly valuable piece of the puzzle. Here is the situation with the current evidence. Authorities in Puma County verified they found a blend of genetic markers inside Nancy's residence. This material came from multiple individuals who are definitely not Nancy or her close friends and family. Sheriff Chris Nanos mentioned that they might have discovered some genetic material belonging to the person of interest. Tests on the gloves found 2 miles from the New York residence did not turn up a hit in CODIS, which is the FBI's massive database for known criminals. It might take a full year to pull apart and study that complicated DNA mixture. Nanos noted that C.C. Moore, a top genetic sleuth at Parabon Nanolabs with over 300 solved cold cases, told News Nation that while it is a major if, the path forward is clear. If there is a usable DNA sample, that individual will be caught eventually. Moving to Section 5, let us talk about physical imprints and chemical residue. The next forensic area involves physical marks. This is where the concept of a set-up lookout spot starts feeling real, making it incredibly tough to dismiss or fake after the fact. Even if someone tries to make a house look untouched, an operative using that space for a mission, staying there with a goal and returning often, will inevitably leave a trail. You might see furniture shifted to get a better view of a target house in the east. Imagine a living room that was supposed to be completely empty. A chair positioned specifically toward a window looking at the New York house is not just a coincidence. It is a piece of evidence. The dents that chair makes in the rug cannot be fixed without a professional cleaner. Plus, investigators can actually measure the pressure patterns on the floor underneath. Even if a carpet gets scrubbed later, it still holds the memory of where that furniture sat and for how long. Scuff marks on wood or tile by a window where someone kept watch can still be found. The windowsill itself will show the wear and tear from someone constantly leaning or touching it at a specific height. To a professional investigator, those marks are measured and compared to the normal wear and tear in the rest of the house. They tell a story about where someone stood and the time they spent there. Category 3 is all about chemical residue. Things like candy wrappers, water bottles, or anything eaten during a long stakeout leave behind evidence like packaging, crumbs, or touch DNA. If the person was a smoker, cigarette butts are some of the best DNA goldmines in forensics because they trap saliva and physical material that basically never rots. Finding a cigarette butt in a rental where the previous tenants did not smoke is a huge red flag for investigators. A simple plastic bottle with spit on it is a great DNA source. The marks left behind are not just what someone meant to leave. It covers everything they ate, touched, or tossed out while they were hunkered down there. There is a fourth group that the public rarely hears about, but the feds take it very seriously in stakeout cases: scent-based evidence. Just being in a room leaves a unique scent profile from body chemistry, soaps, or the food someone was cooking or eating. These smells soak into porous things like carpets, walls, cushions, and even those acoustic ceiling tiles. In cases using canine units, which the FBI's crime scene teams use all the time, scent evidence helps them figure out where to collect biological samples. If a dog alerts on a spot in a room that looks perfectly clean, it is a sign to the team: dig here, scrub this spot, this is where the subject spent their time. In a house that has been cleared out and cleaned, a canine's reaction to leftover human traces can pinpoint exactly where people were moving, even if the landlord had no clue they were there. This is not just backup evidence. In real crime scenes, dog-led searches have found DNA that people would have walked right past. Then there is the matter of weird smells that neighbors might catch and report. Aldine Meister, a resident of 30 years, knows exactly what is normal for this street. She caught sight of a stranger and kept tabs on them. It is important to realize that a 30-year resident of a quiet area is the perfect person to spot weird changes in a vacant house, whether it is activity, cars, or odd smells. What she told the police was not just about what she saw. Long-term neighbors are the best at spotting red flags because they have spent decades learning the rhythm of the neighborhood. The feds know this. That is why they kept going back to her house. Quick heads up, skip ahead to 2520 for a brief reminder as we dive into the forensic nitty-gritty. Everything I am explaining is an expert look at what these stakeout spots usually hold, not a list of confirmed evidence from this specific home. The FBI has not gone public with what they found inside yet. Section 6 covers the surveillance gear theory. I must use Bob Cryer's literal words here, because his statement to the press goes way past the staging area concepts we previously analyzed. He points to a very particular detail that, if proven true, would stand as perhaps the most critical piece of physical proof in this whole investigation. Cryer mentioned that an empty house, hidden from the neighbor's view, would be the perfect spot to set up high-tech surveillance gear if someone wanted to. It would be easy to hide equipment inside the building or on the grounds without anyone being the wiser. Spy tech tucked away where no one would notice. I want to really look at those words because they come from someone with a very heavy professional background. We are not talking about some internet detective or a talking head looking for clicks. This is a retired SWAT leader who spent nearly 30 years in Pima County law enforcement, working the same area where Nancy Guthrie lives and where this whole search is going down. The phrase "hidden from the neighbors" is the secret to why an empty rental is so perfect for this. A vacant house has zero obvious life. Nobody thinks twice about dark windows. No one cares if the mail piles up. Being empty is the perfect cover. Under that cover, spy gear can run 24/7 without the kind of outside attention it would get in a house where people actually live. Now, Here is the science on what happens when someone installs and then pulls out spy equipment. Taking it out does not erase the past. It just leaves new clues, like mounting holes. To fix a camera to a wall, a door, or a ledge, you need some kind of physical support, even for the tiny hidden ones. Drilling holes leaves permanent marks. Even if someone fills them in later, they stand out against the original build. The filler has a different weight, the paint will not age the same way, and the texture will never quite match the original wall. If the holes were not filled, maybe they left in a rush, or just did not care. A fresh set of drill marks in a rental is a dead giveaway for forensic teams. Then there is glue residue. A lot of hidden cameras, especially ones meant for quick or temporary use, rely on heavy-duty sticky pads instead of screws. These mounts facilitate rapid setup and teardown without any need for power tools. However, once detached, they leave behind a distinct chemical footprint on the contact area. This adhesive ghost is easily recognizable through forensic testing. Forensic testing of glue remnants frequently pinpoint the specific manufacturing class, allowing detectives to categorize the equipment as either consumer-grade or professional-grade gear. The logistics of wiring monitoring equipment are revealing. Since wired spy gadgets need electricity, snaking a cord from the unit to an outlet creates a permanent physical trail. Small punctures in the trim, grooves in the paint, or shifted molding tell a story. Even after cables are pulled out, a skilled investigator can see exactly where they were. Furthermore, even cord-free gadgets plugged into the house's power grid need a connection, which leaves a traceable mark on the outlet or electrical box, along with physical storage chips. Plenty of small-scale bugging tools save data internally. This includes tiny memory cards, thumb drives, or various external storage modules. When someone clears out a bugged room, they usually just grab the obvious stuff, like the camera case, the microphone, or the main body of the unit. Yet, data chips are minuscule. They might stay tucked inside a bracket when it's pulled down, slip behind the floorboards, or get missed during a frantic exit. Should a memory chip from a hidden camera stay behind in the house, perhaps trapped in the drywall or stashed behind an air intake, inside those empty structural gaps where a device was once bolted, the memory might hold weeks of footage showing Nancy Guthrie's land, her front door, and her daily movements, essentially the data used to plan the events of February 1st. Just to be certain, we have no idea if any of this was actually discovered. Federal agents have kept quiet regarding what they actually turned up during their deep dive into that residence. I am outlining the scientific approach and the types of clues any skilled crime scene crew would hunt for, following the logic Bob Krieger shared in his public briefing. Section 7 covers the Bureau's specialized forensic units. This is crucial because of the high level of expertise involved. These teams are not your average street detectives. They operate as elite recovery groups, where every member is an expert in a niche field, such as cyber forensics, DNA gathering, microscopic trace study, or chemical lab work. During a sweep of a related location, these specialists comb through everything at once, hitting every square inch of the house, its infrastructure, and all furniture. Looking at this kidnapping probe, any relevant side location gets the full forensic treatment. It isn't just a simple walkthrough, it's a comprehensive breakdown of the entire house. A team arrives with blacklights, test kits, digital gear, and photo logs, ensuring the official chain of custody starts the moment they cross the door. Additionally, there is a cybersecurity angle concerning the empty house that hasn't made the news yet, though federal pros would certainly be looking into it. Any gadget that hits a local wireless network logs a unique serial number called a MAC address inside the router's internal history. The hardware stores those logs, and authorities can pull them from the service provider with a legal warrant. Should the house have had working web access while the suspect was there, any phone or laptop they connected would leave a digital fingerprint for the feds to find. Federal investigators regularly demand these documents from providers. This same investigative strategy works for mobile phone tracking as well. If the perpetrator lingered near that home for days or weeks, their handset would have reached out to local towers in the Catalina foothills during every single trip. Signal logs pulled from the carrier provide a timed history of a phone's location. Detectives can then compare this data to the critical dates in their investigation. Detectives have been questioning locals about January 11th and 24th, specifically around the time that mysterious person Aldine Meister mentioned was spotted. In their official plea, the family pointedly requested that the public look back at two specific windows of time, between January 31st and February 1st, and late on January 11th, ex-agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer observed that the earlier date likely marks a reconnaissance mission by the kidnapper. They were likely scouting the victim's home, checking the locks, watching her habits, and weighing the dangers 3 weeks prior to the actual crime. If a person was staying in that rental and their mobile pinged a nearby tower on January 11th, those two facts point directly to a single suspect. The January 11th date is a huge clue. When a family and the feds tell people to watch a specific night 3 weeks early, it's because that date is critical to the case. Coffin-Daffer's theory about a practice round aligns perfectly with Kia's tactical analysis. You can't pull off a kidnapping this flawlessly without doing your homework. You have to scout the area, time the light sensors, and watch for neighbors. You need to ensure your disguise holds and your getaway path is clear. January 11th was likely the dress rehearsal. If a suspect used that empty rental as a command center during January, then what happened on January 11th is just as traceable as the evidence from the end of the month. Mobile logs are permanent. Every time that phone came or went, a digital breadcrumb was saved deep within the provider's database. The Bureau has the legal tools and the tech to grab those files. Part 8 focuses on DNA matching. Let's connect all these different dots now. We have covered everything from genetic samples and scuff marks to camera trails and phone logs. A second scene doesn't just add more proof, it completely reshapes the legal landscape. Here is the deal. Federal agents recovered genetic material from Nancy Guthrie's residence. The Pima County Sheriff already went on the news and backed this up. He stated for the record that the sample likely belongs to the kidnapper. However, the evidence is messy because it contains DNA from multiple people. Scientists are struggling to isolate the individual profiles, which could take a full year. Consequently, detectives are now leaning on ancestral DNA searches. Expert genealogist C.C. Moore claims the case is winnable if the sample is solid. One strategy involves uploading the data to sites like GED Match to find a match. They look for the suspect's distant cousins, then map the family history back down to find a person they can ask for a DNA swab. This same method took down the Golden State Killer and led police to Brian Kohberger in the Idaho student killings. It's effective, though it can take a long while. Fortunately, there's another way that doesn't rely on the messy DNA from the victim's place or the suspect's family tree. That alternative is the second crime scene. If that empty house nearby was a hideout used for stalking and planning, it's no longer just an abandoned building next door. It is an active crime scene where a kidnapping was plotted. If a sweep of the rooms finds fresh DNA on a windowsill or a tabletop, it's game over. Detectives now hold genetic samples from two distinct locations. This makes the side-by-side analysis simple. Does the evidence from the empty house line up with the mystery profile found at Nancy's place? Is the same person linked to both spots? We are talking about two different scenes and two independent forensic sweeps. There is a separate paper trail for each. Having the same person's code show up twice is a massive deal for federal prosecutors. Lawyers have a standard strategy when fighting a single piece of forensic proof. They claim it was tainted, handled poorly, or just moved by accident. That strategy falls apart when you have to justify why the same person's traces were found in two spots by different crews on different days, both tied to the missing woman. The courtroom burden shifts to, why is your hair or skin at both houses? Explain why you left a mark next door and where the victim was taken from. How is that a fluke? Justify the timeline. One suspect, two locations. This extra site changes the whole game, moving way beyond just having one more piece of proof. Let me be totally clear about the boundaries here. No one has officially confirmed that the feds actually pulled any samples from that empty rental. There is no proof that spy gear was found. There is zero confirmation of a forensic hit. I am just breaking down the investigative mindset and how pros work a case, not leaking facts. This is about the what-if scenario. Section 9. The laborers. Brian Enton reported on another lead that people are overlooking, which is the simultaneous probe into local builders. Agents were doing more than just checking on the old neighbor. They went door to door, asking for the full names of every handyman or builder active in the area right before she vanished. Enton pointed out how intense that level of detail was. It was not just a general question about renovations. They wanted a specific roster for every job site and every shift. Reporter JLR also noted that the feds hit a job site near Camino Escalante repeatedly. They were grilling the crew, scouring the grounds, and tossing the tool sheds just blocks away. The Bureau has not verified these claims, which fits their usual no-comment stance, but it perfectly matches the narrative Enton has been building. Look at what this says about their strategy. If they think the kidnapping was a calculated hit, as the sheriff suggested, they are hunting for the stakeout phase. Where was the perp watching her? Where did they set up their lookout point? Being on a crew lets someone hang around for ages without looking sketchy. Trucks come and go, and guys walk around for weeks without anyone blinking an eye. A job site is just as good a front as an empty house. They both serve the exact same purpose for a stalker. These are just ways someone could loiter in the area for a long time without ever being spotted as a stranger. The feds are following both leads because they point to the same mystery. Did a predator use a nearby spot to plan the crime? Think about what these twin probes tell us about the current status. When agents juggle the empty house and the work crews at once, they are not just guessing. You do not have federal officers tracking down specific builders and searching sheds while also digging into an old tenant for no reason. Unless there is a single idea that links them, investigators do not waste time on dead ends like this. When you chase two different leads at the same time, it is usually because the facts suggest they are going to meet at the same point. These moves could be different ways of cornering a single suspect or an entire group. Or it might just be the feds being thorough, stripping away every possible alibi before making their final move. Regardless, this laser-focused approach shows they have come a long way from the beginning, when they were sifting through 13,000 random tips. High-level probes often use a tactical concept frequently referred to as the coverage map. Prior to going all in on a specific lead, detectives need to clear every single person who had a valid excuse for being around that main scene during the relevant time frame. A former tenant provides one kind of local access, namely residential cover. Construction crews offer a different excuse, specifically professional site presence. Once you have vetted both groups, conducted interviews, run DNA swabs, and double-checked their schedules, the remaining names belong to individuals who were in that specific area without any justifiable reason to be there. That remaining group is your prime target list. It looks like the Bureau is grinding through that exact process right now. In a real federal kidnapping case, this isn't just a classroom exercise. It is a slow, steady, and unstoppable march toward the truth. Chapter 10. What the feds already know. We can be sure of one thing. Agents definitely searched that property. We know because agents don't spend 6 weeks asking questions about a place and then just walk away without going inside. This is certain because the Bureau's own rules for federal kidnapping cases mandate searching every single building that becomes a serious point of interest for the task force. We are sure because a couple of neighbors urged detectives to check that specific home, with one tip arriving just days into the hunt. The feds definitely recognize a criminal base when they see one. Over decades of handling mobs, terrorists, and kidnappers, they have searched hundreds of these sites. They are experts at spotting genetic traces, physical clues, gear marks, and electronic trails. They have the gear, the skills, and the warrants. When the forensic team hits a house in a missing person case, they aren't just looking around, they are taking everything. Whether they actually found any skin cells, spy cameras, or hard drives in that house is still a secret from the public. When Newsweek asked the Phoenix office about the empty house lead, they just gave the usual brush off. They do not talk about active cases. But that quietness doesn't mean they found nothing or that the trail went cold. It is how feds operate to keep from tipping off the bad guy, messing with witnesses, or ruining their day in court. Ex-agent Jennifer Coffendoffer put it simply in late March. This investigation is absolutely sizzling on all fronts. Even if we can't see their progress, I promise the Bureau is currently sifting through a massive wave of leads that dwarfs most typical criminal cases. That perspective comes from a former agent who truly understands these inner workings, confirming things are really intensifying behind the scenes. It has been 8 weeks since 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished without her vital meds. Yet her daughter Savannah recently shared that she is still holding on to hope. The family has put up $1 million, while the feds added another 100,000, as total tips submitted to the Bureau have already surpassed 13,000. Deep within a quiet neighborhood in the Catalina foothills, a house that looked like a simple vacancy is now at the heart of a federal probe asking the same question as our title: what was inside? Investigators searched every single room to identify potential staging grounds, though officials haven't revealed if they found the specific evidence they were looking for in the house. If you have any information at all regarding Nancy's whereabouts, federal authorities want to hear from you at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Go to tips.fbi.gov. The family reward is $1 million, and the Bureau is adding $100,000 for info leading to a conviction. Nancy is 84 and depends on daily medication, so time is running out. Please stick with this case by subscribing and sharing your thoughts, especially if you followed this since the beginning, because your focus on this matter truly makes a massive difference. Share this update with other followers, because the more people who stay vigilant, the harder it is for the culprit to slip back into normal life. Behind every high-profile disappearance is a deeper lesson about community, attention, and the quiet responsibility we owe one another. This story reminds us that evil does not always arrive in obvious ways. Sometimes it hides behind ordinary routines, empty houses, familiar streets, and the false comfort of thinking, someone else will notice if something is wrong. What stands out most is that the first warning signs often come from everyday people. A neighbor notices a strange pattern. A resident senses that something feels off. A worker, a passerby, a friend, or a family member sees one small detail that does not belong. These moments matter. They are not paranoia. They are part of how communities protect the vulnerable. This case also teaches us that truth leaves traces. Even when silence, fear, or deception try to bury it, human actions leave behind evidence, memory, and consequence. That is why persistence matters. So does hope. Most importantly, Nancy's story is a call to care more deeply for the elderly, the isolated, and those who depend on others for safety. Being observant is not nosiness. Speaking up is not interference. It is compassion in action. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is refuse to look away.